Hello and welcome to the Ontological Rabbit Hole. This episode, Hypnosis. I was extremely skeptical about hypnosis and I rejected the notion that anyone could have that degree of control over my mind. I just didn't want to accept it. It was something I wasn't prepared to accept on an emotional level. Since then, I learned how to do it. And I am a completely unqualified but proficient hypnotist. I've also been a subject to some pretty good hypnotists, which is how I learnt to do it myself. As someone who has direct subjective experience of these things, I'll be asking the following questions. What is possible with hypnosis? What is hypnosis and why are humans vulnerable to it? What's it like to be hypnotized or to be a hypnotist? What crossover is there between advertising, cults, hypnosis and mind control? And you might even want to add to that ideological possession. Surely a hot topic of our times. And lastly, but most importantly from the view of this particular series, what's hypnosis got to do with ontology? All this coming up on the Ontological Rabbit Hole.
You can't.
What's possible with hypnosis? This is all quite dramatic, Manchurian Candidate style, but despite the fact that it was reported by journalists, well, tabloid journalists, that Darren Brown has convinced people to commit murder, can you see a flaw with this? This man hasn't been convinced to kill Stephen Fry. He's been convinced to participate in a show with Darren Brown that will feature misdirection showmanship. Subconsciously, he's playing along. That's how I would see it. That's my read on the situation. There's just no reason to try and get someone to break their own ethical code of killing someone when you can simply say to them, one way or another, so it may be explicit or it may be implicit, look buddy, you're on a TV show. Wild stuff is going to look like it's going to happen. We've all got it in hand. There's health and safety on the team. You can see that we're taking this seriously. Just go along with it and everything will be fine. That's it. So we can't use this as an example. And we should be willing to engage our critical thinking and our skepticism when we see things like this. Now, I think it's perfectly reasonable that Darren Brown has trained him with deep hypnotic states and that he's probably not consciously playing along with this, he's probably subconsciously playing along with this. And that makes all the difference in the world. The experience that this guy has could be very, very real to him. As for the real question, is it possible to train a Manchurian Candidate? Well, I can't really tell you. I haven't tried. There's no one I wanted dead enough. You know, it's a little bit past my code of ethics, really. But if I haven't tried, how do I know? Well, I don't. One of the biggest impediments to anyone having a clear understanding of what's possible with hypnosis is that people are very tempted to jump to conclusions. Rather than saying, well, the hypnotist that I went to didn't use the right technique, didn't have the right engagement, and wasn't quite talented or able enough to bring about the effect, people will jump to conclusions like, oh, well, it doesn't work on me. Well, without properly testing, you wouldn't know. And my position would be that hypnosis is only the exploit of normal brain function that allows you to learn and adapt to situations. So I suppose if you can't learn and adapt to situations, it's entirely possible that you are immune to hypnosis, but you probably wouldn't want to be in that state anyway. It might hold you back in life. That's not to say that people who are critical thinkers can be a real hassle to hypnotize. They take a lot more time and energy and require a lot more skill. But I think that if you're able to spend enough time with someone and invest strongly enough, I can't see limits on what you can achieve with it. I mean, obviously you've got to keep in mind that you are reprogramming someone's brain, and so you can make them see and experience almost anything if you've got the time and inclination. Now, if they're suggestible, this gets a lot easier and you can accomplish quite a lot in quite a small amount of time, which is one of the reasons why stage shows with hypnosis are so careful to gradually filter down from the whole audience to the people who are the most suggestible and the most compliant. That's not to say that there isn't a certain amount of consciously playing along with regards to stage hypnosis. I can't rule that out. I don't have the personal experience to verify it one way or another. I mean, I don't really know. But what I do know from my own experience of hypnosis is that, particularly if you get the very suggestible people and you've got someone who's very good, that it may well be that those people are experiencing the suggestions that they've been given quite seriously. Alternatively, in situations like that, because it's been done so quickly, because it's very little investment to try and hypnotize somebody and spend so little time in trying to properly get them into the right mental state, that I am still a little skeptical about what's possible with stage hypnosis, which is funny because I've always been a little bit skeptical about stage hypnosis, but I did take it a lot more seriously after I realised that hypnosis was a real phenomenon. And I think this leads us quite nicely into the thing that people find as a sticking point and the reason why people can't accept what's possible with hypnosis. And I think that's very much because, going from my own experience, that it's very easy to slip into the assumption, even if you don't mentally, consciously register it, that you are directly looking at the world around you. There's sort of the camera theory of vision, if you like. And neuroscience tells us this is wrong. Your brain is constructing the world around you that you perceive. And that's the reason why people can hallucinate. It's the reason why you're subject to visual hallucinations and illusions. And even if you've not hallucinated, you've certainly seen an illusion. And visual illusions, they are the essential clue that your brain is constructing the sense of reality that you have. And when hypnotists are able to make you see things, they really are working with your subconscious to present your consciousness with different information than what it would normally process. And I've been quite careful about the way that I just worded that, because a lot of us like to think of ourselves as objective people wondering about the world, making entirely rational decisions. And it's really not quite as simple as that.
One of the things that hypnotists learn is that people are irrational pretty much all the time, and they just rationalize their decisions and believe that it made sense all along. And that's the normal way of things. Until you get in that mindset, the whole world looks confusing. You can't understand why you gave your good reasons and your facts and your logic, and the person you're talking to didn't change their mind.
Who amongst us hasn't been there? Even if we've made a really solid case, when it comes to answering the question of what is hypnosis and why are humans vulnerable, I would simply say that you can't go too far wrong with considering the notion that we're continually hypnotized all of the time. Now, this might sound very dramatic, and I'm not trying to suggest there's someone who's going to pop out of your wardrobe and give you secret commands or anything like that. It's more the notion that the way that we build our view of the world is full of cognitive shortcuts. I've been taught a lot at school, as everyone does. I didn't go out and verify these things. I didn't check all of the peer research of all of the discoveries that I learnt about. I didn't try and falsify those things. There's a certain amount that we take on faith. Even if you're opposed to religious faith, you've probably got an enormous degree of faith in science and in institutions and in human beings. The idea that we can all be rational is in the truest sense of the skeptical term, that we would only really believe something if we'd seen it for ourselves. Throw that out the window. It's not going to work. As a species, we are doing things that are far too complex for any one member of the species to understand all the intricacies of what is going on. It dictates that we absolutely have to have cognitive shortcuts, ways of persuading each other that things are true and as just accepting them. Because if we didn't just accept them, and we had to verify them for ourselves before using them usefully, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We wouldn't have the society that we've got now. We all have belief systems. All of us. No exceptions. And when we start saying, well, mine's not a belief system, mine's actually true, you've missed the point. You might be on board so far and you might be saying, well, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I understand that people have incredible and interesting and very varied belief systems that inform their choices of what they do in the world. But that seems a very long way away from hypnosis, where someone is saying the right words, negotiating with someone's subconscious, gaining authority very rapidly, and using that to change the person's perspective on the world and what they see and experience, so that their conscious experience of reality is fundamentally altered. Well, how much do you think your belief systems change your perspective on reality right now? I understand hypnosis seems different because it's an extreme of what's possible with the absolutely normal and natural ways in which our brains process the world around us. And I think that it's worth paying attention to how hypnosis works, because it will inform you as to how the rest of the world normally works. Hypnosis is possible because we have to survive as a species, and we're incredibly interdependent. We're always influencing each other subconsciously all of the time. And from the suggestive and persuasive techniques that I've come across, it's quite alarming when you learn some of them and then you realise that everybody's doing them without realising to a lesser or greater extent. The training of our belief systems and the adoption of authorities of belief are natural and normal human things. And if you find that disquieting, if we want to make progress as a species, I think that we need to be very honest about that. And I think that we need to reach peace with that. To me, science is the struggle of trying to ensure that our beliefs align with our measurable, predictable, objective reality that seems to be outside of us. The power the notion of the objective truth seems to have is astounding, and it's the reason I'm able to talk to you right now. The technology that's involved in all of this, we wouldn't have been able to arrive to it unless we'd have been able to, as a species, take advantage of the laws of nature in order to construct these technological marvels that we have. We haven't done that in spite of our group dependency. We've been able to achieve it because of our group dependency. So I don't want you to go away thinking that all belief systems are distortions of reality. Some of them are incredibly powerful and achieve a tremendous amount of good.
So, if anybody's nervous, and there always is a few people that are nervous, I'm going to suggest to you that you can avoid this process by simply ignoring my instructions for the next 3 minutes. For the rest of you,
what's it like to be hypnotized or to be a hypnotist? Well, with direct experience of both, I should be able to tell you. My own experience of being hypnotized was one where I was doing as directed and not really expecting it to work. It all seemed rather normal and just doing things that didn't seem to make very much sense, right up until the point where I started to realise that it was actually affecting me. And that was really interesting. I would say some of the best hypnotic techniques and suggestion and persuasion that I've seen have been absolutely fascinating to watch. From my own sort of internal subjective perspective, I've been there and people have been going through the motions of a particular technique or method, and I've just sat there and I've just noticed my own perceptions changing, or the way that I feel about the situation changing. And I'm just sort of looking there in the background of my consciousness just going, you just did that. That's quite clever. How did you... Oh, right. That's how I picked up some of the techniques. So what's it like to be hypnotized? Well, I imagine most people will use a technique of deep relaxation and focus. If you've ever meditated, there are crossovers. They're not identical, but they're very similar in terms of state. If you're a person, you know what it's like to be hypnotized. And I only say that in a jovial way, but if you've walked to the store and 2 minutes in, you don't remember exactly how you got to the place you are right now, you were just sort of lost in thought and there you are. If you know, the notion of doing something on autopilot, right? What's it like to be hypnotized? Well, I think what we're really asking with that question is, what is it like when somebody else seems to have an authority in your mind that you're not used to? It's strange. I mean, I didn't freak out because I didn't necessarily assume that this person was able to do anything they pleased, and I was watching what they were doing. On the extremes of my experience, I've had someone be able to redefine what my sense of reality was to a point where I was aware of, let's say, normal reality, for want of a better phrase, and I was aware of the reality that they were trying to create, and the two existed for a little while completely simultaneously, sort of on top of each other, but discernible as separate things. That was bizarre. But I did experience this alternative reality that the hypnotist had control over. And because I don't trust very easily, if I'm just completely honest, I'll trust to a point, but I don't trust 100% with people. I'm a 1 foot on the ground kind of guy. Not in all situations and with all people, but particularly in this situation I was. I very much got the sense that I could have psychologically have let go, and then I would have been in a reality that was being defined by somebody else. And it was just as real as this reality. That's the thing that people don't appreciate. The feelings, the perceptions, the things that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you feel, all these things can be defined by somebody else, and they will seem completely real to you. And I think that's the thing that really blows people away with hypnosis. So what's it like to be a hypnotist? Well, I would say that first it's quite a lot of hard work, because you just feel like you're doing lots of stupid things and you're not really expecting it to work, and after a while you start to see some signs of success. And if you keep at it further than that, it starts to become second nature, and the more confidence you get, the better you are at doing it. I think the strangest thing for me to report as a hypnotist is that I often feel like I'm going into a trance with the person I'm trying to hypnotize if it gets quite intense. It's almost like we both end up in some other mental state and of extreme focus, and I'm the one guiding and they're the one sort of passively accepting the creation that I'm coming up with. It's perhaps not surprising that I almost feel like I'm going into a trance with them, because to really hypnotize somebody, particularly if they're a little bit resistant to suggestion, it takes an enormous amount of mental energy, and you have to focus and really concentrate on what you're trying to achieve. It's a very interesting experience.
Obedience was highest when the person giving the orders was nearby and was perceived as an authority figure, especially if they were from a prestigious institution.
For whatever reason, people turn to possession by very, very strict ideological ideas, and, they were willing to be possessed by those ideas to the point where they would undertake actions that you'd think would be completely impossible for theoretically civilized people.
What crossover is there between hypnosis, advertising, cults, and mind control? And you might want to add to that ideological possession. They all reshape belief systems in a particular fashion. Hypnosis tends to be thought of, at least, as reshaping belief systems quite briefly, quite powerfully, by rapidly giving somebody quite a lot of authority in someone else's subconscious. The effects are usually thought of as temporary, but it's not quite as straightforward as that, especially as people can have hypnotherapy in order to avoid smoking. Advertising. Advertising is a lovely one, because so many people don't think they're the ones influenced by adverts. And yet it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Go figure. I mean, you could argue that hypnosis was mind control, really. Cults and ideologies promote ways of seeing things that maintain certain status quos within those belief systems. That's the way that I would interpret these things and see these things. And when we're asking the question what the crossover is, they're all kind of the same deal, really. They're all various ways of changing our belief systems. However, all of those have associations with unwanted, undesirable change. Nobody really wants to be a member of a cult, right? I mean, there's a lot of negative connotation associated with the word. However, there are certain things that people yearn for in life, meaning, a sense of trying to put the world right. Cults and certain ideologies promise you the opportunity of doing this. They can be very alluring and very tempting.
But you're not conscious, and that's for eternity, right?
Yeah, there's no evidence that I have any consciousness of anything.
The problem with getting indoctrinated into a particular belief system, the problem with holding on too tightly when you don't necessarily know, means that you can't see clearly. Let me show you what I mean.
What do you believe? What do you think happens when we die?
Well, so I can make some unassailable statements about what happens when you die.
Of course he does just that. He takes a little while doing so. He goes into explaining what happens to your body when you die.
I know that's going to happen because you can measure where the energy goes. And that's how I want to go out.
But you're not conscious, and that's for eternity, right?
Yeah, there's no evidence that I have any consciousness of anything.
There's no evidence that anyone's conscious at the moment. We've got consciousness correlates, sure. They describe conscious experience, and I'm fine with that. But they are just correlates. They're describing something that we experience subjectively, and the brain can go almost all the way with that. You can say that the entire of your conscious experience is just your brain. You could say that. It wouldn't be a crazy position to adopt. However, we're still lacking the entity that experiences things. You. Is that the same thing as the observer in quantum mechanics? Nevertheless, it doesn't make sense to describe experience as happening to itself. If you say that you're the brain experiencing itself, then that's not really any different from me saying I think I'm the universe experiencing itself. They're both tautologies. You could argue we had a scientific model of conscious experience. I mean, that is the scientific world as far as we can see. Since we can't see what it is that does the experiencing of your brain now, then we've got no basis to see where it goes. We can't observe it now. I mean, this is a problem that everyone around you could be philosophical zombies. This is David Chalmers' territory. This is the hard problem of consciousness. Neil deGrasse Tyson seems to gloss over that a bit. He doesn't seem to mention it or state his own beliefs with those caveats. It's all just presented as kind of a follow-on from those unassailable facts.
Did you have consciousness before you were born? Were you saying, how come I'm not on Earth? My gosh, I need to be on Earth. Or where am I? No, there's just the state of non-existence.
Firstly, I don't remember being two. It doesn't mean I wasn't in existence because I don't have any recollection of it. Your move, Tyson. Secondly, since we can't model the experiencer, we can't say for sure, one way or the other, whether or not that you actually experience multiple lives. And we just don't know. It's entirely reasonable if you only experience your brain while you're having this experience of being human, that you were doing something before you were born, if you can look at it in that linear time kind of way. It doesn't mean you'd know it now. Our most advanced science only seems to say what this world is, this world of conscious experience. It doesn't say what the conscious experiencer is. And the likes of Daniel Dennett try and circumvent that problem by simply saying there is no experiencer. And then he says things like, well, yes, it feels like something to be a bat. For what, Dennett? You can't just chop off a bit of a sentence and hope that the problem goes away. As someone who has witnessed their own perceptions and feelings and state of mind change under hypnosis, and knowing how powerful suggestion and persuasion are, I realised pretty quickly that what I considered to be me wasn't my personality. It wasn't the way that I react or the way that I feel. For me, the essence of me is just that experiencer. Much to his credit, he's actually quite honest about what motivates his particular belief.
The way I look at it is the knowledge that I'm going to die that creates the focus that I bring to being alive. The urgency of accomplishment, the need to express love now, not later. If we live forever, why ever even get out of bed in the morning? Because you always have tomorrow. That's not the kind of life I want to lead.
Well, look, Neil, you can keep all those wonderful things while having immortality. You've just considered and conceived of immortality in a way that is possibly a little bit naive from my perspective. I don't mean to cause offence by saying that, but it just doesn't seem like Neil's thought about this for very long. Okay, so let's keep it simple. And let's keep it scientific. We know that the brain encodes for conscious experience. We don't know what the observer is. We could conceive of the experiencer as just fundamental. You don't have to magic it up then for the right brain structure. You don't have to have a strange mechanic for consciousness suddenly appearing in things that look like brains. You don't have to have the magic. In that sense, everything is conscious experience, and there is one unified observer that experiences it all. You know, the whole one consciousness subjectively experiencing itself kind of thing. You know, these ideas that are more sophisticated, they don't have the problems that Neil deGrasse Tyson seems to be alluding to, because if you have an immortal being that experiences mortal lifetimes, you get the urgency, you get the drive and the need to do what you can now, because this character you're playing will go. And, you know, you might not agree with what I've just said. You might not like the idea of fundamental awareness, and quite what you'd use as a mechanic to explain consciousness is beyond me, and I'm interested to hear what it is. I mean, so long as you don't just say emergent property and expect that to mean something. Emergent properties for things like waves in physics can be measured, whereas awareness cannot be externally measured. It's just not visible in our scientific world. It seems far more reasonable to me that there'd be some sort of fundamental awareness rather than strange brain magic. Awareness clouds spontaneously arise from complicated information. These ideas are explored with people like Donald Hoffman, who does conscious realism, and they're also explored in the theories by Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, with their Orchestrated Objective Reduction theory of consciousness, which looks to be leading the field at the moment in terms of things like that. They've put 20 testable predictions forward, and I think they've got 5 of them confirmed. And their initial critics, Max Tegmark, saying, oh, the brain can't support quantum mechanical effects. Well, turns out he was wrong. And quantum biology these days is quite the field. We should be skeptical of claims, but we should allow that skepticism to flow in both directions, not just in one particular ideological one. I think the only thing that just rubs me up the wrong way a bit with Neil deGrasse Tyson's interview here is that he doesn't feel the need to present his own views couched within the caveat then he might be wrong. And that's fine for a lot of people, but with Neil, we have this air of scientific authority about him. I just think that he's taken his worldview as just a de facto truth. And I would argue that rationally or reasonably, that's just completely unsupported. It's just one possibility. It's not discounted, it's just not supported either. It's all up for grabs. Nobody really knows. But if you're suggestible, you'll probably just conflate his scientific authority with what he has to say on ontology. And that's pretty much exactly the reason why you need to be aware of just how suggestible you are. You can't just assume anything in particular. You don't know the world. For me, persuasion, hypnosis, and psychology, the knowledge that I've cultivated for myself, is my toolkit for knowing how to at least deal with these things in a way that's slightly more sophisticated than I would have been capable of without having that conscious awareness of these processes that influence the way that I think, that influence the way that everybody thinks. It's just a question of being aware of it. There are many episodes to come, and they all lie on the foundation of what I learnt about hypnosis. Thank you for watching.
There's a 3D world out there with objects and colors, and all vision does is, like a camera, take a shot, a snapshot of what's already out there.
Most people think consciousness is just supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
The camera theory of vision. And it turns out that that's not right.
Consciousness is one of the fundamental facts of human existence.
You don't need billions of neurons, trillions of synapses to take a snapshot.
It is wonderful. It's astonishingly wonderful, but it is not a miracle.
The very existence of consciousness is a problem for materialism.
It's a bunch of tricks.
So what's going on is that we've recognized that vision is a process of construction.
And some people just can't help themselves.
You construct in real time all the colors, shapes, motions, and objects that you see.
They can't take seriously.
Each of us is conscious.
They won't take seriously
Consciousness also is what makes life worth living.
the idea that consciousness is an amazing collection of sort of mundane tricks in the brain.
So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
We all have our own inner movie.
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Let me conclude that consciousness is a process in the structure of the universe, which I think bridges kind of Western science with non-duality.
If nature is made of nothing but unconscious matter, how come we're conscious?
Connected to the brain by quantum computations in microtubules.
Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration.
If I'm going to solve the mind-body problem, I can assume that physics is fundamental, and then my burden is to get consciousness.
That we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively.
Or, what I'm trying to do is the opposite. I assume consciousness is fundamental. Then, my burden is to show that all of physics comes out of it, quantum mechanics and so forth comes out of this. And it does.
There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves.
If we weren't conscious, nothing in our lives would have meaning or value.
I never expected that the movie The Matrix might be an accurate representation of the place in which I live.
But at the same time, it's the most mysterious phenomenon in the universe.
Here's Tom with the weather.
You got to the end bit I didn't mention. Well, since you did, I'm going to give you a fun test. Here's a clip from Scott Adams' podcast. It is loaded with suggestion and persuasion. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to figure out all the different techniques that he's using. It's a good exercise for you if you want to learn this stuff.
Do-do-do-do. Bum, bum, bum.
Bo-bo-bo-bo-boo. Hey everybody. Good morning. Come on in here. Grab your beverage. We're going to do a little simultaneous sipping because that's the best way to enjoy delicious coffee. Everybody, simultaneous sip. Oh. Okay, somebody said to hold up until you grab your beverage. So get ready. There's still time. Grab your beverage. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Run back to your screen. Hurry. All right, here we go. Good stuff.